The email came in at exactly 2:30 a.m., just as the cabin lights dimmed and the Buenos Aires skyline vanished beneath the clouds. Subject line: Termination notice, effective immediately. For a few seconds, I couldn't process what I was reading. I kept blinking, thinking maybe the screen hadn't fully loaded, but it had. Everything was there in perfect clarity: my name, my role, and the sentence that made my heart drop through the floor. Your employment with Helix Dynamics has been terminated, effective immediately. Your access has been revoked. Please do not return to any company property. No call, no meeting, no thank you. Just a sterile final notice sent while I was mid-flight, alone, in business class, surrounded by sleeping strangers who had no idea the woman in seat 4A had just been erased from the company she spent 9 years building. And the sender? Victor Ashford, the CEO himself, the same man who shook my hand 2 weeks ago, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're the only one I trust to pull this off." 10 days, 3 continents, Seoul for initial alignment, Berlin for compliance, Buenos Aires for the close. I hadn't just participated in this deal. I had architected every piece of it, from the first phone call to the final handshake. 3 global pharmaceutical giants, 1 synchronized migration to Helix's proprietary data platform, $1.5 billion across 5 years. I had just closed the most important deal in the company's history, and now I didn't even work there anymore. The cabin hummed with the low drone of jet engines. Someone 2 rows back shifted in their sleep. A flight attendant passed silently, collecting empty glasses. The world moved on around me, while mine had just stopped. I stared at the screen for a full minute, read the email twice more, felt the cold settle into my chest. Not rage, not yet, just the hollow disbelief of someone who gave everything and received nothing in return. Then, without saying a word, I reached under the seat and pulled out a second laptop. Matte black, unbranded, encrypted with military-grade protocols. The one nobody at Helix Dynamics knew existed. The one I had been quietly loading with plans and strategies and client relationships for the past 3 months. I opened it, logged in, watched the screen blink awake in the darkness of the cabin. A simple logo glowed on the wallpaper. Half finished. Solara. And I smiled. They thought this was the end of my story. They had no idea I had already written the next chapter, and it started right now at 35,000 feet, in the dark, alone, exactly where they wanted me, exactly where I needed to be. Before I tell you how a single termination email brought a $2.8 billion company to its knees, if you appreciate stories about women who refused to be erased and corporations that learned the price of arrogance, hit that subscribe button and tap the like button right now. You need to hear what happened next. My name is Claire Dawson. I was 44 years old when Victor Ashford decided I was expendable, that I could be deleted with a midnight email while flying over the Atlantic after closing a deal that would define his company's next decade. He was wrong, catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. But let me start at the beginning. 9 years before that email, I was a 35-year-old strategic negotiator with a master's from Columbia, a decade of experience closing pharmaceutical data contracts across 3 continents, and a reputation for walking into impossible rooms and walking out with signed agreements. I joined Helix Dynamics when it was still mid-tier, scrappy, fighting for relevance in the pharmaceutical data infrastructure space. Revenue was hovering around $90 million, the client list was thin, the sales team was demoralized, the technology was decent, but the strategy to sell it was practically non-existent. That's where I came in. I spoke 4 languages fluently: English, Spanish, German, Japanese. I had spent years building relationships with biotech conglomerates, regulatory bodies, and procurement directors who most salespeople couldn't even get on the phone. I understood compliance frameworks across 12 jurisdictions. I could read a room in Tokyo as easily as a boardroom in Berlin. Within my first year, I landed Helix's largest contract ever, a $200 million integration deal with Vienna Pharmaceuticals in Seoul, a deal that 6 other people on the team had attempted and failed, a deal that the board had almost written off entirely. I closed it in 11 days, flying back and forth between New York and Seoul 3 times, sleeping 4 hours a night, rewriting the proposal structure from scratch after the client rejected the first version within 20 minutes. When the signatures dried, Victor Ashford stood in the executive lounge, raised a glass of expensive champagne, and said, "This is what elite talent looks like." He was talking about me, but he was looking at the board members, making sure he noticed him celebrating the win. That should have been my first warning. By year 3, I had restructured the entire international division, built it from a one-woman operation into a team of 47 specialists, spanning client strategy, regulatory compliance, and technical integration. I hired every analyst, designed every pitch framework, created the compliance templates that became company standard across all global accounts. I flew 200,000 miles a year, missed holidays, missed birthdays, spent more nights in airport lounges than in my own apartment, but the results were undeniable. By year 5, revenue crossed $600 million. 3 new continental offices opened. Our client retention rate hit 94%, the highest in the industry. By year 7, we hit $1.1 billion. I personally managed relationships with 12 of our top 15 accounts. The board called me the secret weapon in quarterly reports, though never by name. Always the international strategy team, never Claire Dawson. By year 9, Helix Dynamics was valued at $2.8 billion. We had 1,400 employees across 9 countries. Our pharmaceutical data platform was considered best in class. Fortune 500 companies were calling us instead of the other way around. And through every milestone, every late-night flight, every contract rescued from collapse, I was the constant, the one who never stopped, the one who always delivered. But the corner office never came. I was promised Executive Vice President of Global Strategy 3 separate times over 4 years. Each time the conversation started with enthusiasm and ended with delay. The first time it was under review, the second time it was being restructured, the third time there was just silence. Weeks of silence, followed by a subject change in the next executive meeting, as if the promise had never been made. I told myself to be patient, that the work would speak for itself, that merit would eventually win. Then I heard the truth. It was during a quarterly board lunch. I was in the adjoining conference room preparing a client portfolio for the afternoon session. The sliding glass door had been left slightly open, just enough for voices to carry. One board member laughed. "Claire's brilliant, no question, but come on. She walks into a room and every other executive goes quiet. She dominates every single pitch. It's intimidating." Another replied casually, "She's not exactly C-suite material, is she? More like field operations. High performance, but not leadership track." Field operations. 9 years of building their international empire, 9 years of saving deals that nobody else could save, 9 years of making Helix look far more competent than it actually was, and they reduced me to field operations, like I was a missile they could aim and fire, but never allow into the war room where decisions were made. I stood in that empty conference room, holding the portfolio I had spent 2 weeks perfecting, and something crystallized inside me, cold, clear, permanent. It wasn't about merit, it was about threat perception. I was too visible, too effective, too many wins that couldn't be redirected to someone else's column. The quiet ones got promoted, the ones who made noise, who dominated rooms, who closed impossible deals, those ones got contained. They didn't want to elevate me, they wanted to use me, indefinitely, without acknowledgement, without advancement, without ever letting me sit at the table I had built with my own hands. I didn't storm out, I didn't confront anyone. I went back to my desk, opened a blank document and typed 2 words, exit strategy. Because experience had taught me the one truth that corporate loyalty always tries to hide. Power respects leverage, not dedication, not sacrifice, leverage. And I was about to build more leverage than Victor Ashford could possibly imagine. Around that same time, Victor's daughter Celeste Ashford was hired as a strategic advisor, a vague title inflated by legacy and insulated from scrutiny. She was 27 years old, no pharmaceutical background, no technical training, 2 years of consulting experience at a boutique firm that primarily served her father's network, and she had already made one catastrophic mistake. During a client demonstration in Singapore, she initiated an unauthorized data transfer that exposed confidential patient information from a pilot partner's clinical trial database. The breach affected 14,000 records. Under international pharmaceutical data law, it should have triggered mandatory disclosure, regulatory review, and probable litigation. It should have ended careers. Instead, Victor called me at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Clean it up quietly. She didn't mean to, she just didn't understand the system. I didn't argue. I spent 72 hours pulling every connection I had, contained the leak before it reached mainstream media, spun the incident into a beta testing anomaly that got buried in trade publication footnotes. I even took the media calls myself so Celeste's name would never appear in print. Nobody thanked me. I told myself it was loyalty, that protecting the company meant protecting everyone in it, even the CEO's incompetent daughter. But loyalty without reciprocity isn't loyalty, it's exploitation. I just hadn't admitted that to myself yet. 3 days before my trip across continents, I opened the shared drive to finalize pitch materials for the Meridian deal. These were slides I had been refining for 6 weeks, custom analytics, regulatory mapping, proposal architecture designed specifically for each of the 3 target clients. Everything was there, exactly how I'd left it, perfect, precise, except for one detail that made my blood run cold. The document properties listed the author as Celeste Ashford. She had made subtle edits, rephrased a few bullet points, adjusted some formatting, moved a chart from one slide to another, but the bones were mine, the strategy was mine, the research was mine, the name on it was hers. I clicked through every slide slowly, carefully, documenting the changes, comparing versions. The modifications were cosmetic. The substance was entirely my work, presented under someone else's identity. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march into Victor's office and slam the laptop on his desk and demand accountability. But I already knew what would happen. They would call it collaboration. They would say I was overreacting, being territorial, emotional. That word always appeared when a woman dared to claim ownership of her own brilliance. So I closed the laptop, packed my bags, booked my flights, and said nothing. The hurt didn't explode, it seeped in slowly. Every time someone praised Celeste's strategic clarity, every time she recited my frameworks in meetings like she had invented them, every time I sat in silence, watching my intellectual DNA get transplanted into someone else's career. I had protected her, covered for her, saved her reputation, and now she was erasing mine. But I wasn't sitting idle. 6 months before the theft, before the email, before any of it, I had already started building the parachute. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I had been in corporate America long enough to know that hope is not a strategy. I called the project Solara. No flashy pitch deck, no venture capital fanfare, no LinkedIn announcement, just a name, a legal structure filed quietly through an independent attorney, and a growing team of brilliant people who had all been burned by the same machine. Former Helix engineers who had been laid off when Victor gutted the innovation department to cut costs, product strategists who had watched their ideas get implemented without credit, compliance specialists who had raised red flags that were ignored until those flags became lawsuits. My core team was small but formidable. Jenna Okafor, former legal lead at Helix, meticulous, fearless. She understood pharmaceutical data regulation better than anyone I had ever met. Rahim Patel, systems architect. He had designed 70% of Helix's back-end infrastructure before being quietly let go during a restructuring that conveniently made room for one of Victor's college fraternity brothers. And Noah Langston, former finance strategist, who had predicted the exact quarter that Helix's growth would stall. He was right. They fired him anyway. Every part of Solara was designed to correct what Helix had broken: agility instead of bureaucracy, transparency instead of political maneuvering, client-centered thinking instead of executive ego. We built the platform nights and weekends, used encrypted communication channels, met in apartments and coffee shops, never offices. Every conversation was careful. Every document was protected. We weren't breaking any laws. I was still performing my duties at Helix flawlessly, but I was also preparing for the day when my performance would no longer matter to people who had already decided my ceiling. That day came faster than I expected. The executive ballroom gleamed like a cathedral of corporate excess. Gold linens, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner. The company had spared no expense for what they called the Strategic Growth Gala. In reality, it was a coronation, Celeste Ashford's coronation as Vice President of International Strategy. My department, built from nothing by me over 9 years, being handed to a 28-year-old whose primary qualification was sharing DNA with the CEO. I stood near the back, holding a champagne glass I hadn't sipped from, watching Celeste glide through the room in a designer navy dress, clinking glasses with board members, dropping buzzwords like multilateral integration and cross-border scalability that I had written into pitch decks she then claimed as her own. Victor took the microphone, tall, smug, perfectly tailored suit, the kind of man who could sell sincerity to a room full of people who knew better. "We've watched Celeste grow into this role," he began. "I can think of no one better to lead our most ambitious initiative yet, the global expansion through the Meridian Partnership." The room clapped. My stomach twisted. Then he added the line that nearly broke me. "And she'll be shadowing Claire on the upcoming international trip as part of her leadership transition." Shadowing me, training the woman who had taken my title, my department, and my narrative on a deal I had spent 10 months building across 3 continents and 6 time zones. They expected me to smile, to nod gracefully, to play the role of the loyal soldier, helping her replacement look competent while quietly disappearing into irrelevance. I smiled, but not the kind they expected, the kind that comes right before the drawbridge lifts. Celeste leaned in afterward, all warmth and rehearsed charm. "I hope we'll have time to walk through the Buenos Aires structure before the meetings. I'm still catching up on the European regulatory details." "You should," I replied calmly. "They ask tough questions." She giggled. "Well, I'll just point them to you. You always know what to say." I sipped the champagne for the first time. It was flat. What Celeste didn't know, what Victor didn't know, what nobody in that glittering room understood was that I had already booked a separate itinerary, one that didn't include her, and by the time they figured that out, it would be far too late. By the time I landed in Seoul, I hadn't slept properly in 4 days. The gala, the fake congratulations, Celeste's stolen slides, Victor's backhanded announcement, all of it had worn me to the bone. But exhaustion was a luxury I couldn't afford. What waited on the other side of each customs gate was bigger than my bruised ego. The Meridian deal. 3 legacy pharmaceutical firms joining forces in a historic data migration. 10 months of whispered introductions, cultural navigation, and trust building had brought them to the table. Now I had 10 days to close it. In Seoul, the tension was immediate. Taka Morimoto, CTO of Gennara Pharmaceuticals, was sharp, skeptical, and brutally direct. "You promise security. So do your competitors. Why should we believe you offer more than words?" He said this before the tea reached the table. I pulled up custom encryption specifications I had designed with Helix's internal engineers, protocols the board hadn't even reviewed. I walked him through multi-jurisdictional compliance architecture, real-time redundancy systems, zero-trust frameworks calibrated specifically for pharmaceutical data sensitivity. When I finished, he didn't smile. He simply nodded once. "I see why they send you. The others speak, but they do not understand." As we walked to his car, I asked softly, "And if there were a leaner model, same capabilities, fewer layers between need and delivery?" Taka paused. "You mean less Helix?" He didn't respond directly, but before closing his car door, he looked back. "Send the materials again, privately." In Berlin, I faced a different challenge. Eurocom Biotech's general counsel, Katrin Voss, was meticulous and unimpressed by corporate polish. The regulatory landscape post-Brexit had made compliance a minefield, and Helix's standard contract language was riddled with ambiguities I had flagged months earlier. Nobody had fixed them. So at 11:40 p.m. in a tiny rented flat, I rewrote the entire contract using templates Jenna O'Coffer had developed through Solara's independent legal framework. The next morning, I handed the updated drafts across the conference table. Katrin raised an eyebrow. "This isn't the Helix standard." "It's the one that works," I replied, "unless you prefer 3 weeks of delay and 50 red lines." She studied the first page. "You did this yourself?" "Yes, off the record." She smiled. "Maybe next time we negotiate, you'll be sitting on this side of the table." In Buenos Aires, Rafael Ibarra, CEO of Austral Biosystems, grilled me for 4 hours. Risk thresholds, capital exposure, long-term support models, data sovereignty provisions. Every difficult question in one room. When I held firm on numbers that Helix's own board had fought me on, he finally exhaled. "I trust you, Claire, but I don't trust Helix. You know that." "I do. Unless you leave." I leaned in, voice low. "And if there were a way for you to get this deal without that risk, without the politics, the bottlenecks, the noise, would you be open?" Raphael didn't blink. "You know the answer to that." 3 cities, 3 continents, 3 identical patterns. Every client trusted me. None of them trusted the logo on my business card. The deal was done. The contracts were aligned. The clients were committed. It should have been the proudest moment of my career. Instead, I opened my laptop on the return flight, and the screen glitched. Internal server booted me out. Access denied. Slack expired. Calendar gone. Outlook blank. Then the email appeared. Termination. Effective immediately. Signed by the man who owed his company's future to my work. They had locked me out of everything. VPN blocked. Credentials invalid. Even my internal contact list erased. 9 years of building deleted with a few keystrokes while I sat in seat 4A above the Atlantic Ocean. They didn't wait until I landed, didn't have the courage to look me in the eye, fired me in silence after I had just handed them $1.5 billion in guaranteed revenue. But here's what Victor Ashford didn't know. 6 weeks earlier, following standard protocol for high-risk international negotiations, I had initiated a legal backup of every Meridian deal document, pitch decks, contract versions, financial modeling, client correspondence, handwritten meeting notes, all approved by Helix's own legal team as standard precautionary procedure. I had everything, and I had Solara. I pulled out the matte black laptop, opened the encrypted portal. Everything was there. Every strategy document, every client contact, every contract clause. Secure, legal, mine. Grayson hadn't fired me. He had freed me. I opened a clean document, typed 3 words. "Let's begin." Closed the laptop, leaned back. Outside the window, nothing but darkness, but for the first time in months, I could see the horizon clearly. The next morning, I went to Helix headquarters one final time. Not for closure, for confirmation. The security guard, Daniel, who used to wave me through with a smile, froze when he saw me. "Miss Dawson, I wasn't told you'd be coming." I pressed my badge against the scanner. Red light. Access denied. Daniel winced. "I'm sorry, HR flagged the system this morning." I nodded. It wasn't his fault. He looked more uncomfortable than I did. Upstairs, my desk was stripped bare. Plants gone, framed client letters removed, even my chair replaced with a new one, tag still hanging from the back. My nameplate had been removed, not relocated, removed. The digital display outside the 27th floor conference room now read Strategic Integration, VP C. Ashford. On a nearby table, the internal newsletter headline announced Celeste Ashford to lead Meridian Partnership in Global Expansion Push. The article referenced my departure as a transition. No acknowledgement of the woman who built the deal, flew across 3 continents to negotiate it, and personally salvaged 2 of the 3 contracts from collapse. I dropped the newsletter in the trash and walked out. Back on the street, the city felt louder, sharper, indifferent. Nobody knew that the woman walking past the coffee cart had just been erased from a $2.8 billion company. I checked into a hotel overlooking the river, room on the 15th floor, closed the curtains, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to feel it. Not rage, not self-pity, just the cold recognition that the place I had poured 9 years into had never truly valued me. They used my brain, my instincts, my relationships, and when they were done, they deleted me like a temporary file. But I wasn't broken. I was ready. I opened the encrypted laptop, pulled up the secure client portal, clicked the contact list: Taka Morimoto, Katrin Voss, Rafael Ibarra. Sent 3 emails, 4 words each. The door is open. All 3 clients signed into Solara's platform within the hour. Back at Helix, the collapse was immediate and total. Monday morning, 9:15 a.m., Victor called Taka Morimoto. No answer. Called again at 9:35. Nothing. By 10, he looped in Celeste and the interim strategy team. They tried Eurocom Biotech next. Katrin Voss had always been responsive, direct, professional, the kind of person who returns emails within the hour. That morning, the phone rang 7 times before going to voicemail. 2 follow-up emails bounced back with an out-of-office message. Please direct all Meridian inquiries to your current point of contact. They didn't have a current point of contact anymore, because that contact had been me. By 11:30, panic consumed the building. They called Austral Biosystems. Raphael's assistant answered calmly. "He's unavailable." "Unavailable today?" Victor asked. "No, unavailable for Helix." The line went dead. $1.2 billion in active contracts suddenly floating in silence. Not hostile silence, not aggressive silence, just absence. The kind of quiet that tells you everything about who still holds the conversation and who has lost it entirely. Victor tried one final move, had investor relations reach out to all 3 firms publicly, requesting joint statements confirming Helix's continued leadership on the Meridian project. One reply came back: no greeting, no signature block. Helix no longer speaks for us. 5 words that carried more weight than any title Victor Ashford had ever bestowed or withheld. Jenna called me that evening. "They're in full crisis mode. Celeste is panicking. Victor thinks you orchestrated everything, but nobody can prove a thing. None of the clients will return their calls." "They don't need to," I said. "Do you want to make a statement, go public?" I looked at the Solara homepage Rahim had just published. No founder bio, no about page, just the logo and a single line. "What we build belongs to those who build it." "No," I said softly. "Let them sit in the silence a little longer." At 9:30 the next morning, Solara's press release went live. Simple, elegant, irreversible. Solara Inc. is proud to announce a multi-continent strategic partnership with Gennara Pharmaceuticals, Eurocom Biotech, and Austral Biosystems. The agreement, valued at $1.5 billion over 7 years, will deliver secure, modular data integration across 3 regions, redefining global pharmaceutical connectivity. Signed, Claire Dawson, CEO. No mention of Helix, no fanfare, just precision and presence. By 10:45, the first trade article went live, then 3 more, then 8. By 11:15, TechWatch Global posted the headline that made me lean back, take a slow sip of tea, and smile for the first time in weeks. The silent takeover. Who is Solara, and why is everyone at Helix panicking? Financial Chronicle called it the boldest silent shift in enterprise pharmaceutical technology in a decade. By early afternoon, Solara's inbox held over 70 partnership requests and investor meeting invitations. We accepted none of them. Not yet, not until the foundation was completely sealed. Meanwhile, the 3 clients remained utterly silent. No press quotes, no tweets, no explanations. They had no reason to explain anything. They had simply chosen differently. They had chosen me. Rahim arrived at the hotel suite that afternoon with a printed copy of the press release and a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne. "You gonna frame this?" he asked, grinning. "I might tattoo it," I replied. He handed me a manila folder. Financials. Implementation budgets already transferring. Jenna triple-checked everything. No issues. I exhaled. Not relief, recognition. This wasn't luck. Every move had been deliberate, every conversation planted with precision, every relationship nurtured over years, while Helix was busy promoting politics over performance. That evening, a voicemail appeared from a number I recognized but hadn't saved. Victor Ashford. I played it once. He didn't yell, didn't plead, just asked the question they always ask when the ground finally gives way beneath them. Was this personal? I deleted it before it finished. Of course it was personal. It was also professional, strategic, and 10 years overdue. 3 weeks later, the Global Health Technology Summit in Vienna, the final act. Victor was there, pitching a desperate partnership with an Eastern European data firm, trying to signal recovery after Solara's emergence had cratered investor confidence. I watched from the back of room C214 as his team set up the presentation. Nervous energy everywhere, forced smiles, the distinct atmosphere of people performing confidence they didn't feel. At 9:15, I stepped forward. Slate gray blazer, simple dress, calm, measured steps. The prospective partner's CEO, Andrei Lazovich, looked up from his papers. "Claire." Victor turned. The color left his face so rapidly I thought he might collapse right there in front of his own presentation slides. I extended my hand to Andrei. "It's good to see you again. I represent Solara, and I'm the other party in this negotiation." Silence rippled through the room like shattered glass. I laid out Solara's infrastructure proposal: cleaner architecture, faster deployment, lower cost, already vetted by Andrei's technical team, every specification verified. Andrei studied the documents, looked at Victor. "We can't afford another misalignment, not after Meridian." Victor cut in sharply. "That was sabotage." I didn't flinch. That was foresight. I offered them a choice. They chose clarity over politics. Victor turned to Andrei. "You want to work with someone who walks away from her own company mid-deal?" I smiled. Sharp, quiet, final. I don't walk away from things I build. I rebuild them, without the people who drilled the holes. Andrei looked at his legal counsel, nodded. "We'll proceed with dual review. Marin's proposal considered primary." I held Victor's gaze one last time. "One condition. I proceed only if you're not involved. I don't negotiate with people who fire their architects mid-flight." Andre didn't hesitate. I respect that. Victor gathered his papers, left the room without a word. The door closed softly behind him, and with it closed the last chapter of his relevance to my story. Outside the summit hall, Munich streets hummed with spring sunshine and tourists crowding cafe terraces. Rahim and Jenna waited in a nearby courtyard, both holding coffees, both watching summit coverage on their phones. "Heard you ended a dynasty," Jenna said. "No dynasties," I replied, sitting beside them, just balance restored. The weeks that followed were swift and final. Celeste Ashford resigned from Helix. No press conference, no statement, just a single line buried in industry trades about leadership restructuring following the collapse of several major partnerships. Nobody asked where she went, nobody cared. Victor Ashford was removed from the Helix board by unanimous vote 3 weeks later. No scandal, no public meltdown, just removal. A quiet erasure that mirrored precisely how he had tried to erase me. The symmetry was not lost on anyone paying attention. Solara's headquarters opened on a Tuesday morning. Warm light through tall windows, clean floors, purposeful energy. On the far wall, a plaque in brushed steel. Solara, founded by Claire Dawson. Not in footnotes, not behind team credits, not hidden or hedged or attributed to a committee, just there, full, final, visible. I stood in front of it for a long time, fingers brushing the cool metal, remembering every time my name was written into a draft and removed before the meeting, every proposal where I did the work but someone else held the slide clicker, every press release I edited that mentioned the company, the team, the leadership, but never once said my name. They had taken so many pieces of my voice over so many years, but they never actually silenced me. They just made me quieter, and quiet turned out to be my greatest weapon. The boardroom was warm wood and soft lighting, not chrome and intimidation. Linda sat reviewing timelines with Rahim. Raphael laughed on a video call about Brazilian soccer. Taka had sent 3 bonsai trees, one for each continent Solara now served. I sat at the head of the table. It didn't feel like a throne. It felt like home. When I signed the final consolidated contract unifying all 3 Meridian partners under Solara's architecture, I didn't think about the $1.5 billion, didn't think about headlines or vindication. I thought about my name, Claire Dawson, and how for the first time in my career, I was signing as exactly who I was. No performance, no permission, no apology. If you've ever had your name removed from a project you bled for, if you've ever stayed silent while someone else accepted applause for your work, if you've ever been told to let it go when what they really meant was let yourself go, hear this. You are not invisible, you are not replaceable, and you are not finished. Some battles don't require fire. They require focus, stillness, patience, the discipline to build in silence while others celebrate in noise. And when the moment comes, when the ground shifts and the truth can no longer be buried under titles and press releases and champagne toasts, let your presence speak louder than your pain. Claire Ashford thought he could erase me with a midnight email sent from a corner office while I flew alone over the Atlantic. He thought revoking my credentials would revoke my influence. He thought deleting my access would delete my value. He learned what every architect eventually teaches the people who forget who built the building. You can remove the nameplate, you can reassign the desk, you can give the title to someone else and pretend the foundation appeared by magic. But when the walls start cracking, when the clients stop calling, when the silence grows so loud that no press release can fill it, they won't be looking for the person who signed the checks. They'll be looking for the one who drew the blueprints. They'll be looking for you. If Claire's story resonated with you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased, don't stay quiet. Like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories where the quiet ones rise, where the builders reclaim what was taken, where silence becomes the loudest statement in the room, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.